Jarek's head throbbed in rhythm with the blinking lights overhead. A persistent staccato that made him feel like the universe itself was tapping its fingers on his skull in annoyance. He opened his eyes to find the walls around him glowing with a soft, undulating luminescence, like the inside of some bioluminescent jellyfish, except far more intimidating and equipped with doors that hummed in tones he didn't have names for. The floor, rather annoyingly, seemed to ripple slightly every time he shifted his weight. A subtle wave that suggested he might either be in a high-tech prison or on a spaceship designed by someone who had a cruel sense of humor and a fascination with motion sickness. "Fantastic," he muttered, tugging at his restraints. Somewhere between intergalactic jail and a bad amusement park ride. His hands were free enough to pull himself up, but the wristbands glowed faintly whenever he moved, as if reminding him that he was not, in fact, supposed to be standing. A soft buzzing accompanied each step, and Jarek took that as a cue to adopt his most sarcastic tone. "I hope the gift shop isn't closed. I was really hoping for a welcome, soon-to-be-zapped human mug." From the end of the corridor, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Jarek squinted, trying to locate the source, and then froze. She emerged as though stepping through a curtain of light, tall, impossibly graceful, with eyes that shimmered like quicksilver and long, delicate ears that arched behind her like pale, elegant horns. There was no mistaking her for anything human, though the curve of her features, the subtle tilt of her lips, suggested she could have been a model for some futuristic painting in a long-lost museum somewhere on Earth. Her voice, when she spoke, was smooth but carried the weight of centuries. "You are awake." "Ding ding, jackpot," Jarek quipped, though his voice cracked from disuse and adrenaline. "And you are the welcoming committee." His sarcasm bounced off her expressionless face. That was fine. Humor didn't need a reaction to do its work. "Your presence here is anomalous," she said, her words precise, each syllable somehow sharper than the metallic glint of the corridor walls. "Anomalous?" Jarek repeated. "I like that one. Rolls right off the tongue. Sounds fancy too. Makes me feel special." He looked around, noting the way the walls seemed to shift imperceptibly when she moved, doors opening and closing in silent choreography as though the ship itself were alive and mildly annoyed at his trespassing. "I guess that makes me the guest star in this interstellar episode of What Did the Humans Do This Time?" She did not answer, only gestured elegantly toward a side corridor. Jarek sighed, following. His boots made a muted thump against the floor, and he resisted the urge to hop into a dramatic run. He'd learned that dramatic runs rarely ended well for humans in alien spaceships. The corridor widened into a chamber filled with floating lights, small spheres that hovered and drifted lazily as if caught in some invisible current. Their gentle hum made the room feel like a living cathedral. In the center, a child stared at him. Wide-eyed, impossibly solemn, with the same long ears and silvery eyes as the queen, the child tilted their head. "Father!" The word echoed in the chamber like a challenge, and Jarek nearly tripped over his own feet. Which one?" he stammered. "There's a lot of people on the internet claiming to be my child. Most of them are scams, but this one looks real." He paused, squinting. "No, seriously." "How?" His words faltered as he realized the child's gaze was unwavering. "Wait, you're not kidding." The queen's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening ever so slightly, the only hint of movement that betrayed the storm behind her composed exterior. Jarek, being Jarek, tried humor as a lifeline. "Look, kid, I appreciate enthusiasm, but the timing is awful. I'm barely surviving the coffee shortage on Earth, and now I have intergalactic parenting duties." The child didn't laugh. They didn't blink either, which, Jarek decided silently, was probably a superpower or a very bad sign. Instead, they reached out a small hand toward him, the gesture innocent but firm. "Father," they repeated. Jarek swallowed. He could feel sweat prickling his brow, not from heat but from the absurdity of the situation. "Okay," he said finally, holding up both hands in surrender. "Let's pretend I'm your father for now. Just don't expect bedtime stories, okay? I tell bad jokes, and apparently that's how I survived childhood myself." The queen cleared her throat, a sound that seemed to shift the floating lights like a conductor tuning an orchestra. "You will answer for this," she said, pointing a slender hand at him. "Explain." "I would, but here's the problem. I have amnesia, selective memory loss, and a knack for sarcasm," Jarek replied. I mean, sure, there was that one mission decades ago where I might have accidentally, well, created a temporal paradox involving your people. But father is a new twist. I like it. The Queen's eyes narrowed further, and Jerk could swear the lights paused mid-orbit, just long enough for him to feel the weight of her gaze. And then, unexpectedly, she allowed herself a subtle smile, faint enough to suggest amusement rather than kindness. "You are remarkably audacious for a human," she said, her tone carrying the faintest hint of dry humor. Jerk grinned. "Audacious is my middle name. Actually, it's not, but it should be." The child giggled, a sound like wind chimes in zero gravity. And for the first time, Jerk allowed himself a moment of genuine relief. The impossible situation was slightly softened by humor, by the oddity of a tiny, long-eared child laughing at his bad jokes in a palace of floating lights. Somehow, amidst the looming questions of paternity and alien politics, the moment felt almost normal. "Follow me," the Queen said at last, motioning toward a chamber deeper within the ship. Jerk followed, trying to keep his commentary alive. "So, do you serve drinks on this thing, or is it strictly intergalactic interrogation and floating furniture?" Asking for my sanity. The Queen did not answer, which Jerk counted as a partial win. The child skipped alongside him, humming a tune that sounded vaguely like a remix of Earth nursery rhymes. And though he knew he was still very much a prisoner, the ridiculousness of the situation, stranded with an alien queen, a child calling him father, and a spaceship that clearly had opinions about him, made the absurdity almost bearable. By the time they reached the next chamber, Jerk realized something strange. He was not afraid, at least not entirely. The fear was tangled with curiosity and a surprising flicker of protectiveness. He had no idea how he had become the father of this alien child. But if he had to navigate a palace of shifting corridors, judgmental guards, and a queen with a taste for riddles, he'd do it with as much sarcasm, wit, and clumsy heroism as he could muster. The Queen gestured toward a large console that projected floating symbols into the air. "You will explain your connection to this child," she said. Jerk looked at the swirling alien glyphs and then at the child. "Connection. Let's just say it's complicated, like quantum physics with a side of bad parenting." The child laughed again, and Jerk thought, for the first time since waking up on this glowing floor, that maybe, just maybe, the universe had an even stranger sense of humor than he did. And somewhere, deep within the ship, a door clicked shut. Jerk wasn't sure if it was to trap him or to give him privacy. He decided not to ask, not yet. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves, prepared to face the weirdest fatherhood he could imagine, and muttered, "All right, kid. Let's see what we're dealing with. You and me versus an entire alien civilization. This'll be fun." Jerk had just begun to convince himself that he might survive the day without spontaneously combusting from alien stress, when the Queen, with her long ears twitching faintly in what he chose to interpret as impatience, led him down a corridor that defied every law of architecture he had ever known. The walls shimmered and warped subtly as he walked, like liquid metal gently stirred by an unseen hand, and every time he thought he was moving in a straight line, the floor beneath him tilted just enough to make him question his balance, his sense of direction, and possibly his sanity. "So this is your idea of a hall," Jerk said, trying to keep his tone casual, "or are we auditioning for some intergalactic roller coaster show?" The Queen said nothing, her silver eyes gleaming like polished chrome, and he realized quickly that sarcasm might be the only way to survive here without panicking. At the end of the corridor, a chamber opened, filled with floating consoles and holographic projections of star maps that twisted and spun as if each system had a personality of its own. The child floated alongside him, mimicking the Queen's graceful movements with startling accuracy, though less elegantly, often bumping into walls or swiping at symbols like trying to catch fireflies. "Father," the child exclaimed again, pointing at him with a finger that glowed faintly at the tip. Yes, I heard you the first time," Jerk said. "Although if you keep saying it, people might start thinking I'm running some kind of intergalactic daycare, and trust me, I don't even know how to operate a coffee maker properly." The child giggled, a sound like crystalline wind chimes, and for a fleeting moment, Jerk allowed himself to think this might not be the absolute worst day of his life. The Queen approached a console and began inputting a series of commands. her fingers moving with elegance that made Jerk's hands look like flailing noodles in comparison. A holographic sequence appeared in front of him, projecting images of himself from a long-forgotten mission decades ago, images he didn't remember making, involving a covert operation on a remote alien outpost. There he was, younger, braver, and foolishly oblivious, interacting with beings that seemed to acknowledge him with more reverence than he deserved. And then, impossibly, he saw the child's mother, an alien woman with the same long ears and radiant eyes, standing there with a faint smile, as if she had known something he hadn't. Jerk blinked. "Okay, that's a little awkward," he muttered. "Apparently, I'm the star of my own sci-fi soap opera, and nobody thought to send me the memo." The Queen's glare made him cut off his commentary mid-sentence, but he couldn't resist whispering to the child, "Don't worry, kid, I'll eventually figure out how this works." "Maybe." The Queen, clearly unimpressed with his humor, finally spoke. "This child's claim is no accident. There is a genetic link, one that traces back to your past encounter with our kind. You left a fragment of your essence in a way you could not have comprehended." "I left a fragment of my essence?" Jerk repeated, eyes wide. "Sounds fancy. Do you mean I left DNA, or is this one of those cosmic metaphors where I literally left my essence, and now I have to clean it up before the next star alignment?" "You misunderstand," the Queen said, her tone carrying the slightest quiver of exasperation. "This child is your progeny." Jerk stared. The child looked up at him, blinking slowly, their luminous eyes wide with expectation. "All right," he said finally, running a hand through his hair. "Let's assume you're right. That means I'm a father, to an alien with long ears, who seems to think I'm some kind of superhero, which, spoiler alert, I am not." The child clapped their small hands and floated forward, pointing toward the projection of a distant star system. "You help, father." "Yes, I hear you," Jerk replied. "But my expertise in interstellar babysitting is minimal. I might break something." The Queen, ever patient and terrifying, waved a hand, activating a series of floating platforms that hummed to life beneath them. The platforms began to move in a precise formation, weaving through the chamber like choreographed dancers, and the child hopped onto one with the ease of someone born in zero gravity. Jerk hesitated before stepping onto the nearest platform, wobbling slightly. "This is not what I had in mind when I signed up for parental duties," he muttered. The Queen's expression softened slightly, though she did not release her piercing gaze. "Your compliance is necessary. Observation will determine whether you are fit to guide this child through the complexities of our world." "Fit," Jerk repeated. "I'm barely fit to guide myself through a grocery store without causing a minor disaster. And now I have to be a parent in a high-tech alien palace with floating platforms that have zero chill?" He looked at the child, whose small face radiated excitement. "Fine, let's see what we've got." The platforms carried them through the chamber, passing walls that displayed alien flora in suspended animation, rotating orbs of light that simulated weather conditions from distant planets, and a series of robotic creatures that seemed to serve no purpose other than to stare at them silently. One particularly curious automaton extended a long mechanical arm toward Jerk, and he instinctively ducked. Yes, I get it," he said, waving at it. "I'm a fascinating human specimen, now move along." The child laughed, pointing at the automaton, and Jerk felt a warmth he hadn't expected. "Okay, kid," he said, "maybe this isn't completely terrible." They arrived at a chamber that resembled a nursery, though it was unlike any nursery Jerk had ever seen. Gravity shifted at intervals, soft walls displayed holographic storyscapes, and floating toys of unidentifiable alien origin hovered gently in the air. The child floated toward a glowing cube, pushing it with a small hand until it expanded into a hollow projection of a miniature solar system. "Father, play," the child demanded. Jerk sighed, shaking his head. "Play? I barely survived math class. Now I'm expected to manipulate entire planetary systems for fun." He watched the child giggle as he fumbled, accidentally sending one of the planets spinning into a wall where it burst into harmless sparks. "Well," he said, "at least the explosions are pretty." The Queen appeared at the entrance, arms crossed, observing silently. Jerk took the opportunity to quip. "You know, if parenting were part of your royal tests, I'd be failing spectacularly. But hey, at least I'm entertaining." The child floated up to him, giggling, and attempted to push a second planet into orbit with his guidance. Somehow, through luck and clumsy timing, it worked. "Perhaps there is hope for you yet," the Queen said finally, her voice softer than before, a faint note of amusement threading through the words. Jerk paused, blinking at her. "Hope," he repeated. "I'll take hope. Just don't ask me to cook dinner for a star system, okay?" They spent the next hours, or what felt like hours, in a temporal bubble of shifting gravity and floating lights, navigating puzzles, testing reflexes, and avoiding minor accidents that threatened to destroy part of the nursery. Jerk discovered, much to his surprise, that his sarcasm was a useful tool for calming the child, and that humor could even temper the Queen's severe patience. At one point, a minor mishap caused a holographic meteor shower, and Jerk ducked under a floating console while yelling, "Incoming!" "Look out, kid!" The child shrieked in delight, and the Queen merely raised an eyebrow. By the end of the day, Jerk was exhausted, floating slightly as if gravity itself had taken pity on him. The child rested against his shoulder, eyes closing briefly, still glowing faintly. Jerk glanced at the Queen, who studied them both with an unreadable expression. "All right," he muttered, "maybe I can handle this. Maybe. But if anyone expects me to memorize alien lullabies, we have a problem." The Queen's long ears twitched once, almost imperceptibly. The child's small fingers pressed against his chest, and Jerk, despite the absurdity, the danger, and the utter impossibility of it all, felt the first flicker of something like belonging, a strange gravitational pull that made him wonder whether this interstellar accident of paternity might just become the strangest, most chaotic adventure of his life. Jerk woke to the soft hum of the palace's energy fields vibrating through the floor beneath him, the child curled against his side like a luminous little comet. For a moment, he allowed himself to savor the absurdity. A human in the middle of an alien fortress, playing interstellar parent to a child whose existence defied every law he'd ever known. He had never imagined fatherhood would involve floating gravity fields, sentient furniture that occasionally hissed if bumped, or lessons on planetary alignment delivered by a child who insisted that he call her father at least 20 times before breakfast. And yet, despite the chaos, there was a warmth that had begun to take root in him, a strange sense of responsibility that made even the sharp edges of the alien palace feel a little less alien. The Queen appeared at the doorway, her long ears twitching in a way that suggested she had either just smelled something interesting or was suppressing the faintest trace of amusement. "You have spent enough time in the nursery," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "It is time to understand the full consequences of your connection." Jerk rose unsteadily, brushing imaginary dust from his uniform. "Consequences, huh? That's a word humans usually use before everything goes terribly wrong. Just so we're clear, are we talking existential catastrophe or mild inconvenience?" The Queen ignored the quip and led them to a chamber at the heart of the ship. Inside, a holographic array spun slowly, displaying the child's genetic blueprint intertwined with his own, a visual map of impossible connections spanning space and time. Jerk squinted. "Well, that explains a lot. I always wondered why I had a faint craving for galactic pastries." He paused. "I mean, who knew genetics could be so shiny?" The child floated beside him, tugging at his sleeve. "Father helped." Yes, we'll help," Jerk muttered, pressing a button that caused the holograms to rearrange into a series of puzzles. The puzzles were designed to test compatibility, decision-making, and, unbeknownst to him, whether he had the patience to manage the complexities of interstellar diplomacy. As he manipulated the symbols, the child clapped at each correct move, giggling with a sound that made him realize, not for the first time, that their laughter was more valuable than any victory he had ever achieved. The Queen observed silently, then spoke. "Your presence has created unease among the council. Some doubt your intentions, others fear the child's safety. They do not understand you." Jerk raised an eyebrow. "Well, give them a break. I don't even understand me half the time. But hey, I can make a good joke and keep a kid alive. That's a start, right?" The child giggled again, and even the Queen's lips twitched in what he decided must be her version of a smile. Suddenly, alarms blared, red lights flashing across the walls. Jerk froze. The child's small hand latched onto his, their glow intensifying. "Father, danger!" A faction of the alien court had attempted a coup. using the confusion surrounding his arrival to assert power. Robotic sentinels sprang to life, whirring and clicking as they moved into formation. Jerk's first instinct was to duck, but the child tugged him forward. "Father, protect. Protect, sure. That's literally why I got out of bed today," Jerk shouted. He grabbed a console, sending holographic decoys spinning into the chamber, confusing the sentinels with a dazzling display of light. The child squealed in delight, pointing and cheering as Jerk improvised, juggling holographic projections like a circus performer. He dodged and spun, guiding the child behind him, their small hands occasionally brushing his in coordination. The queen arrived, her own movements precise and commanding. Together, they orchestrated a defense, a combination of human improvisation and alien precision. Jerk's jokes didn't stop, even in the midst of chaos. "Hey, try aiming at me next time. I'm a lot softer than your robots." His humor acted as a counterweight to fear, and somehow, the combination of wit and skill held the tide back. Eventually, the council faction was subdued. The queen stood tall, arms crossed, long ears twitching in quiet satisfaction. She turned to Jerk, her silver eyes gleaming. "You have proven your worth, though not in the ways I expected." Jerk exhaled, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. "Well, you know me, I take the scenic route, very scenic. Full of fireballs, lasers, and minor panic attacks, all part of the experience." The child floated up, hugging his arm. "Father, strong. Yes, kid, strong. Strong and sarcastic, the best combination in the galaxy," he said, ruffling their hair. "Also, surprisingly good at dodging alien assassins. Never thought I'd put that on my resume." Over the next hours, the queen guided him through formal introductions to the remaining council members, teaching him the intricacies of alien law, diplomacy, and etiquette. Jerk absorbed it all slowly, humor softening the edges of the alien formality. He realized that he had changed, no longer just a survivor of circumstances. He had become a participant in a complex civilization, a father figure who mattered, whose presence shaped the future of a lineage he never thought he would claim. The child mirrored this change too, no longer simply demanding attention, but following his lead, learning from his improvisation, laughing at his jokes, and sometimes correcting his mistakes with innocent bluntness. Their bond deepened with every shared task, from simple games of gravity chess to negotiating with holographic simulations of entire solar systems. Finally, they returned to the nursery chamber, where the floating toys drifted lazily in artificial gravity. Jerk sank onto a soft platform, the child perched on his shoulder. "You know," he said, "I thought fatherhood would involve a lot more paperwork and a lot less laser hazards, but I guess we make our own rules." The queen appeared quietly, standing in the doorway. "You have grown, human," she said, her voice carrying something close to approval. "You have learned patience, courage, and humor. Humor is more valuable than most realize." "Thanks, Your Majesty," Jerk said with a grin. "I'll add that to my list of life accomplishments, right after survived alien coup and accidentally became a parent." The child laughed, clapping in agreement. Weeks passed, the palace becoming less of a prison and more of a home. Jerk learned the names of floating rooms, the rhythm of shifting gravity, and the subtleties of alien communication. He discovered he could guide the child through complex puzzles, teach them lessons on strategy and empathy, and even navigate the queen's subtle tests of loyalty. All while making jokes that occasionally made even the stoic advisors chuckle. He had transformed from a bewildered prisoner into a father,